Hi guys, welcome to Tactic Devs. In this video, we are going to be looking at how to create custom layout views for a list box. Now the primary function of these layout views is to specify how the list box displays and arranges its child items. We are also going to look at how to switch between different layouts. Now an example of a layout would be something like a towered layout, which would consist of items arranged in a grid pattern. On the other hand, a more compact layout would be something like a list layout, where the items would be stacked on top of each other. Now, being able to switch between different layouts can be very helpful and can actually improve the user experience of your application. Now, for us to understand how we can implement this, let's take a look at the Listbox class and its members. Now, bear in mind, the Listbox inherits from the items control class. So let's first navigate to the items control class. Now here I have a project set up already. So I'll just go to the main window.xaml.cs file here. And I'm going to type in items control. So by pressing F12, I can navigate to the class. Now this items control class has quite a number of properties here. Now because the list box is derived from this class, it means all these properties are actually part of the Listbox class. Now we are only going to focus on two properties, and these are the items panel property and the item template property. So the items panel property here specifies a panel that the Listbox uses to arrange its child items, and this panel is actually defined within an items panel template. So by us creating our own custom items panel template, we can actually specify how we want these child elements to be arranged. Now when we create our own panel, we can actually use a style to actually assign this panel to the control. So inside the style, we can also define some triggers so that we can actually switch between different templates when certain conditions are met. Okay, now the other property is the item template property. So this basically deals with how each item in the list box appears, basically the look of each individual item, the appearance of each item. So the main concept here is that the items panel deals with how the child elements are arranged, whereas the item template deals with how each item looks, basically. Okay, now having explained that, let's get to the coding. Now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a class. I'm going to create a class that inherits from the list box, and it's basically I'm extending the Listbox class because I need to add in some properties that are very useful. Now here, I'll first start by getting rid of this. So here I have a project set up, and actually in my project, I added in an image called folder. I'll be using this image for the item template. So here in the project, I'll go ahead and add in a class. And I'll just give it a name, layout listbox. Now for me to extend the listbox class, which is this class I created here, I need to inherit from the listbox. So I'll just go ahead and say listbox. Now the listbox is found in a different namespace which hasn't been added here to our class, so I'll just type in. So it's found in the system Windows and controls namespace. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and type in list box. I'll change this class to a public class, and within this class I'm going to declare some properties, basically just one property. Now before I do that, I need to create an enum. Basically it's like a class, but for defined values basically. So I'm going to just go ahead and type in enum, and I'll just give it a name, layout. And this enum will specify two types of layouts. So the first one is the tower layout, and the second one is the list layout. I'll change this to a public so that we can use it. Okay, now here in this class that inherits from the Listbox class, I'm just going to add in a property. I'll declare a dependency property. And this property will be of the type layout. And I'll just give it a name, view layout. Now apparently the dependency property here is not recognized, so I'll just go ahead and add in the right namespace, which is the Windows system namespace. So here within the dependency registration method, I'm going to specify the class that owns this dependency property, and that class is the layout Listbox class, which is this very class. I'm going to set the default data. I'll set the default data to list. Okay, so this is basically a class that inherits from the Listbox, and I've just added in an extra property which is called layout. So this is the name of the property, layout, and it's actually an enum. So basically it's between tower and list, so between these two values. Now I'll go ahead and build the solution. Okay, so the solution was built successfully. So I'll go to the main window.xaml file here. I'll just refresh the page. Okay, so within the grid, I'm going to add in the control that I just created, which is the layout Listbox here. Okay, now within this window, I'm going to declare some resources. So I'll just go ahead and say so basically this window resources section simply means whatever I put in this Windows resources section can only be used by this window. So I'm going to be declaring some static resources as well as a style. So I'll start by first declaring and defining a template, and this will be a data template. So basically how the item is going to appear. So I'll just go ahead and type in data. Now when declaring a resource, you need to specify a key. So I'll just say key. And I'm going to just type in list template. So within this data template, what I'm actually specifying is a template that the control is going to use when we are in list, when we are using a list layout. So I'm going to define a stack panel. The orientation of this stack panel will be set to horizontal. Let me just increase the zoom level. So the orientation will be set to horizontal, and within this stack panel I'm going to have an image and some text. So this image is going to get its image from this folder image I added in earlier on. So right here, I need to do something. I need to change the build action. So I'll change this to resource, and I'll change the copy to output directory. I'll send that copy always. So here in the image, I'll set the source to the folder image. I'll give it a height of 10 pixels. Okay, now with the text block, what I'll do is I'll give it a margin, and this margin will be on the right side. So basically I'm going to give it a margin of 3. Now this margin will be actually on the left side, sorry. Now the text property of this text box is actually going to come from the items that we are going to add to our list box. So basically the collection of items that we are going to bind to our list box is going to contain some items, and those items are going to have certain properties. And because we are using a data template, we can actually bind certain properties from those items to this specific text box. So here I'll be creating a binding, and I'll bind it to a property called name. Now I'm going to define this later on, but for now let's just keep that in mind. So name. So this is a data template for the list layout. Now I'm going to declare another data template. In fact, I'll just copy paste. And this time I'm going to give it a name, tower template. Okay, so first let me get rid of this inside. So in this template I'm going to define a grid, and I'm going to split the grid into 2 rows. Okay, so by specifying 2 row definitions, I'm actually splitting the grid in 2 rows. So the first row will have a height of 50 pixels. And the second one, I'll just set the height to auto. Okay, so this little character here sets it to auto. Now inside the grid, I'm going to add in an image and a text box. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to place the image inside the first row. So I'm going to say row, so grid, then I'll set the row property. I'll set that to 0, which is the first row, and I'll set the text into the second row. I'll also set its alignment, the text alignment. I'll set that to center. Okay, and I'll give the image a margin of 5 pixels. Okay, so here we have two data templates. So one is the list template, the other one is the tower template. Now I'm also going to declare some items panel templates. So basically these are the templates that the Listbox is going to use to arrange the child items. These data templates deal with how each item appears or looks like, but those would deal with the panel that the Listbox is going to use to arrange the child elements. So here I'm going to declare items panel template. I'll give it a key. I'm going to say tower panel. I'll copy and paste. So in this panel, which is the tower panel, I'm going to declare a wrap panel. I'll change this key here, I'll change it to list. And here I'm going to declare a stack panel. So when using this template, which is the tower panel template, we'll be using a wrap panel to arrange the child elements. And when we use this one, we'll be using a stack panel to arrange the elements. So these are the resources. Now I'm going to declare a style, and I'll also define some triggers in that style so that it's going to use different templates when certain conditions are met. So I'll just type in style. And this style is actually going to target the very class that we created, which is the layout Listbox class. I'm going to define some triggers. So just a style triggers. So the first trigger is going to monitor a certain property, and that property is the layout property. This is the property that we declared earlier on when extending the Listbox class. And when the value of this property is set to list, it means we're going to set the items panel property we'll set that to set it to the list panel. So basically, when this condition is met, when the layout property is set to list, we are going to use this panel to lay out the child items. We are also going to set the template to use for each item. So I'm going to properties, item templates, and it's a static resource because it's declared there. So we are going to use the list template. So when our layout value is set to list, use the list panel and the list template. Okay, I'm going to copy this and paste. Okay, now if at all the value is set to title, to tower, we are going to use the tower panel and the tower template. So basically we've defined this behavior using this style here. Now, how can we switch between different types of layouts? That's by changing this value called layout. So once this value is changed, the style is going to take care of switching between the templates defined here. So here in the main window, we have a grid. So I'll just resize that. So I'm going to declare a context menu on this list box here. So a context menu is simply the menu that pops up when you right click on a control. So I'm going to say layout list box, then context menu. Okay, so basically I have a context menu and I define a menu and I add in 2 items. So this menu is going to contain one item, and that item is going to have a header called towel. The other one is going to have a header called list. So these are actually clickable items. So I'm going to implement click events on these elements. So I'll say click, and I'll add in a new handler. Okay, I'll do the same for this one here. Okay, now I'm going to give this list box a name so that we can access it in the code behind. So I'll give it a name, my list box. Okay, so I'll go in the code behind, and we see 2 event handlers listed here. So the first one is click 1 and the other one is just click, so we need to go back and verify. So the one with click is for the towel, and the one with click 1 is for the list. So here I'll say my list box, then change the layout, change it to towel, and I'll just copy this code and change it to list. So whenever the first one is clicked, our layout will be set to towel, that's a property, and it will set it to list when we click the other button. Now I need to add in some information into the list box so that we can actually see and visualize that information. So I'm going to create an array of data. So I'm going to just give it a name, data. New array. So this data is anonymous, so it doesn't have any type, but it has some properties. So I'm going to declare a property called name, and I'll assign the first one. Just give it James. So that's only one object in our array. I'm going to add in another one. I'll just copy. So say James, Mike, John, Luke, Oscar, and Charles. Okay, so this is the information. So it's anonymous types. They don't have a specific type, but these are objects with names as their properties here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind this data that I created to the list box. So I'll say my list box, then item source, then I'll set that to data. Now remember, there's a name, there's a property here, name, and we have specified the name. So if we go to the main window.xaml file here, we see that when declaring the data templates, we specified that the text should come from a property name here. So based on the collection of items that we are adding to the list box, it's going to get the name and display it for each item using this data template. So let's go ahead and test the code. Now, before we can test the code, there's something that I need to fix down here. So here in the context menu here, this item menu is actually irrelevant in our case. So the context menu will only contain 2 items. So that's the menu item 1 and 2. Okay, now we can test the code. Alright, so the application is up and running, and we can see that there's a list layout here. And that's because when creating the layout list box class, we declared a property, and in that property we defined that the default data will be set to list. So when this window was being rendered, the style picked the list layout template, and that's what we have here. So I'll now go ahead and try to change the layout. So by right clicking within the list box, we see the context menu pops up here. So I'll just click on title and we'll set that property to title, and the style will take care of switching. And here we can see it changes. We can go back to list, or we can go back to title. Okay. Now maybe the icons are slightly smaller, so we can actually make them a little bit larger. So I'll go ahead and close. So here in our data template for the title template, we set the height to 10, and we shouldn't have done this because we are restricting it to only have a height of 10. We'll get rid of this height, and the height will be calculated based on the height of the row here, which is 50 pixels. We can now test the application again. Okay, so the application is up and running again. So we can now switch to the title layout, and we see it looks much better. We can go back to the list and the title again. So guys, thanks for watching this video. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. I'll see you in the next one.